Welcome to the Faith Bible Church podcast. We hope the message you're about to hear is a blessing in your growth in Jesus Christ. We also pray that the message is not a substitute for your critical place in the local church and in community. Thanks again for joining us. I want to reintroduce you to Ross King. Ross, where'd you go? You're down there. Ross, you can welcome him to the stage with your hands. How about that? Ross, come on over. We've got something special for you today, and Ross is here in a special way as our guest. Let me grab my Bible here, and let me tell you about Ross. Ross is married to Stacy, and they, like Liza and I, had some infertility issues, and so Ross and Stacy have 4 kids, all adopted, a beautiful, beautiful family, okay? Ross is a graduate of Texas A&M University, as I, always, and I met Ross. He's a particularly special friend in my life. So I trusted in Jesus as a first semester freshman, just a few weeks into school. I've told you that story many, many times. I was living in a difficult situation and then moved in the middle of that semester to a better situation. And in that house, I lived with 2 men, and every week, Ross, a guy named Jimmy, my 2 roommates, and I would have a small group study. We would pray together. We would share life together. We would ask questions of each other. And here's a guy, me, just a few years younger than you. We're both children of the 70s. You're early 70s. I'm mid 70s. And here's me, about 15 minutes old in the faith. I get to sit with, on a weekly basis, Ross, who had walked with Jesus a lot longer than I had. And we get to talk about things, and I get to ask questions. I remember some really, really embarrassing moments in those studies where I didn't know how to say things, and I was using my old language, if you know what I'm talking about, sharing my excitement about what I'm learning about Jesus, and they're like, yeah, you can't use those words. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's how I talked before. And they're like, yeah, but you're a new creation now, and you got to leave those words behind, okay? And so it was an amazing, amazing, amazing start to my journey. But Ross is here today to talk about an interesting topic. We're going to talk about depression, anxiety, and Jesus. How about that? We're going to talk about this subject that's not often talked about in the church. We'll talk about why, but tell us how and why this journey, which started about 10 years ago for you, why you are so passionate about this as a follower of Jesus.
Yeah, thanks for, I guess you guys didn't know what you're getting, but thanks for enduring it for the next 40 minutes.
It's actually quite good. Don't worry about it. He's underselling it.
In February of 2012, I turned 40, which is only an important thing because a lot of people feel like 40 is a moment. April of that year, 3 months later, I signed my first ever big Christian publishing deal, which I'm putting that in sort of air quotes because it turned out to be not that big of a deal. But I thought it was like going to change my life and make me better than all of you.
I didn't say that. Ross is obviously a worship leader. He has been involved in worship leading and songwriting. He was involved in Breakaway Ministries, early Texas A&M ministry as a worship leader there. Now lives in Nashville with his family as a recording artist and a songwriter. And so this is the first start of that. I apologize. I left that part out of your intro.
Just don't interrupt me again. These preachers are not used to just like handing over the mic to someone else. I'm sorry.
Will do. So, okay, I'll keep my seat.
Some of you are really applauding a lot at that joke. There's a lot of applause there.
They
tremendous,
know me.
Tremendous amount of applause. So, I signed this deal April. 1 month later, in May, and this is going to be a cruel thing. I'm going to throw a heavy thing at you after you laughed. But 1 month later, my dad was fishing down at the coast, really, really close to here with my brother and some friends, and he drowned. And I remember getting a call. I was preparing. It was a Sunday night. I was preparing to fly to Nashville. I lived in Texas at the time, in College Station, and I was going to fly to Nashville the next morning to do some songwriting. I already at that point had my publishing deal or whatever, and I was trying to like fulfill it, right? So I get a call at 10:30, which you're not supposed to get calls at 10:30. And so something's not quite right. And my brother is on the phone, and he's sort of like half giving my dad chest compressions, half trying to talk to me. and said, we're trying to bring him back, but Dad is gone, and I need you to go over to Mom's house and tell her, because I lived in the same town as my mom and my dad. So I get in the car. I remember I left a voicemail from my publisher at the time saying, I'm not coming tomorrow. My dad just drowned. That was a really weird phone call to make. And as I get to my mom's house, I knock on the door. Now it's 11. You're not supposed to get knocks on the door at 11. So she knows something's wrong. She opens the door. My parents were very, very in love. She sees me and kind of just knows from my face, starts saying, no, no, no. We kind of fall into each other. And that was the beginning of, that new season of life. And I know now that was kind of an on-ramp for me for depression and anxiety. And I want to be clear that you don't need an on-ramp as traumatic as that. I told the parts about turning 40 and signing the deal because those are all like sort of bumps, good and bad changes that can provoke, some unsteadiness in your inner self. But for me, I began to struggle with depression. I didn't know that at the time. I found out later on. And I remember maybe 6 or 8 months later, I was in the car with my wife, and one of my uncles, one of my dad's brothers, called and was talking to me about my mother. Her home had some problems, like they needed to get a contractor or something. And he was trying to help, just be a good brother. And so we talked for maybe 15 minutes through just details of what he could do and whatever else. And when we got off the phone, I started to cry and really cry, pull over the car and cry. And my wife is like, what's wrong? And I'd started just sort of spilling about responsibility, and I don't want to be in the middle of my dad's brother and my mom, and I don't want to deal with these things. And one thing that they don't tell you is that no matter how old you are, when you lose a parent, you feel like a kid, and I felt like a child. And so anyway, I was weeping and sharing all that, and my wife said something really, really profound. She said, I don't think you even have room to grieve the loss of your father because you are grieving the death of the life that you thought you would have. And let me say that again. I didn't have room to grieve the death of my father because I was grieving the death of the life that I thought I would have. And that's important for a lot of reasons in my story. And let me just say that there are some of you in the room, possibly, that's the last thing that you're going to hear me say because you're going to be thinking about something that you're grieving. But one of the difficulties of this concept that I'd never thought of is that for all kinds of trauma and tragedy in life, there are systems and methods to deal with it. Flawed systems, but they're systems. So someone dies, there's a funeral, there's life insurance, a marriage ends, there's a court proceeding, there's a divorce, someone gets really sick, you can go to the hospital, visit them, make a meal train, bring them casseroles and all that stuff, lose a job, maybe you can get unemployment. There are systems in place for the broken things in life. But this situation, no one knows it's happening. You don't know it's happening, and so no one is doing anything for you. And sometimes you can suffer in this kind of thing completely unaware, and no one's going to come to you and say, how are you doing grieving that death of that life that you wanted? And so many of us have stories. Probably everyone in here has some kind of story where my life was going this way. It's exactly what I thought was going to happen. I had at least a few years planned out, and then something happened that diverted you off that plan, and nobody knew to come to you and say, how are you now that thing you wanted, that life that you dreamed, that journey that you mapped out isn't working, right? So that was a massive blow to my just whole sense of foundational life. But that helped me to start thinking through, all right, this is what I'm doing. I'm grieving this. So as a songwriter, that's what I do, and it's kind of my favorite way to deal with things, for better or for worse. I started writing songs about this stuff, about these kinds of ideas. Is it a form of
therapy for you, writing
for
songs?
Sure, yes. So much of my writing will start with, I got to get this out just to make me feel better. And I'm a verbal processor, so that's helpful to me to kind of just get it out there. And so I started writing about it and sharing about it, in my my dozens of fans or whatever, I told them about this stuff, And people, and I realized pretty quickly that in the church, we're not really talking about depression, anxiety, emotional extremes. And I didn't know that. I hadn't prepared myself for that.
You asked me before this, we were
Right.
talking about sort of why that is. Why don't we talk about it more in the church? And in our discussion, I thought of two things off the top of my heart. And that is, one, very practical. You would all nod your head with this. It's pretty awkward to talk about. It can be very awkward to say, hey, I feel like I'm struggling with depression. And the other person might not know how to respond to that, right? I'm overcome with anxiety. I'm so afraid I don't want to get out of my bed in the morning. How do you handle that? So it can be socially and relationship awkward. I think the second reason is a little bit more profound and a little under the surface, is that suffering, grief, pain in these sorts of expressions, anxiety, fear, depression, they really begin to highlight some potential holes, deficiencies in our theology. When we think about God, God says that I'm supposed to be joyful and peaceful, and I'm not experiencing that now. What does that mean for my understanding of God? That isn't to say that your theology is all wrong, but I know that when we went through infertility, as a seminary student, as a pastor, I started asking questions that I knew the right answer to. I knew that God does not act this way, but yet we still ask them, because these things cause us to test our theology. That's why theology is so important. But that's, I think, why, probably there's many other reasons, why the church isn't very good at talking about it.
Right. Yeah, and all that's true. And for me, and I think there's also an element of, have you ever gotten sick and needed to call in sick for something, but thought, I don't sound sick enough, I should put on a sick voice, Maybe I'm the only one, but depression, anxiety, emotional health issues, they don't manifest in a way that's super obvious to your look. So you're tired of saying, hey, I know I look normal, but I'm miserable. You don't want to do that, right? And I think that's part of it too. But for me, a lot of this was tied to shame. I realized some people weren't processing grief the way that I was. And so I felt ashamed. I remember standing we had just moved, we moved to Nashville in 2015, so a couple of years into this. And I was super insecure about having moved that late in life to pursue this thing. And I would go into my closet in the morning, and I would think about who I was going to be working with that day and how cool they were. And I would make sure to try to find shoes that were, this is a real thing. I would try to how cool am I going to look? These people are cool. And I always felt super insecure. But I would stand in that closet, and I would say out loud, this is weird, I'd say out loud things like, why aren't you better? People's dads die and they get better. Why aren't you better? What's wrong? I would just be talking out loud to myself and sort of saying these sort of awful things like, you drug your whole family here, and this isn't really working, this thing you're doing. I would just speak that over myself. And I just felt a tremendous amount of shame. And I remember I'd written these lyrics. I don't know if Scott warned you, but I'm going to sing some songs during this time too, so that'll be super awkward.
I would have to interrupt you again to do that.
Yeah, sorry. Well, let's, You just did. So, way to go. Lost my train of thought. Going to go back to the beginning. Put that slide about Jesus. So I'd written these lyrics about Zacchaeus and this woman in Mark 5 who can't stop bleeding internally. And I don't know in my mind what I was going for, but I just liked these two stories. They felt like they kind of tied themselves together in some way. So you have Zacchaeus is this guy who we mock with this child song, this terribly...
He was a wee little man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's such a terrible thing he's remembered for that. If he's in heaven, he's probably super mad about the way we've memorialized him. But anyway, he knows Jesus is going to come by, and he's got a bad reputation. Everyone hates this guy. So he hides up in a tree, and I guess just thinks, Jesus will come by, I'll glean something, I'll see what the hype's about. Maybe he'll change me in some way, right? And then there's this woman in Mark 5, and Mark 5's crazy full of just cool stuff. But in this particular story, Jesus is on his way to bring somebody back from the dead, basically. And on the way there, this woman who can't stop bleeding, she kind of chases him down through a crowd and touches his robe and runs away and gets healed when she touches him, right? And there's this super sci-fi moment of him being like, hey, hold on, some power has left me. Who touched me, you know? And in both of these situations, you have a person who wants to interact with Jesus, but doesn't want to deal with him. Fix me, but don't make me deal with you, I think is the theme over those two folks. And what does he do? With the woman, he goes and finds her, and it says, your faith has healed you. With Zacchaeus, he says, I'm coming to your house to have a meal with you, which is a social mistake for Jesus, right? We want to be fixed. I don't want to stare him in the face and work on it. I just want him to fix me and be done with it. And I saw I was dealing with some shame, all this stuff I'm talking about, and I remember those lyrics were kind of up on my desktop, just kind of waiting to be written into a song. I do that sometimes. I'll just have lyrics I've written. And I saw that title, and I opened it, and I just started crying and saying, oh, these people feel like me. They feel the shame of not getting better, but they don't want to deal with the sort of deliberate and confrontational nature of working through Jesus, even though he's going to love you through it, right? It's still, we don't want to do it. So I wrote a song about that.
As he gets ready, recall your biblical knowledge back to the beginning in Genesis 2. All things are good. Genesis 2 ends with Adam and Eve were naked and they were not ashamed. And then Genesis 3 starts with the rebellion. Satan is there lying. They eat the fruit and immediately they feel two things. They feel shame and fear. So they hide from God whom they walked with. They hide from him and they try to cover their shame. And immediately after that, God, in a prophetic way, provides a way through, and that is the promised one, Jesus, who will heal us ultimately from fear and shame.
There's something heavy, I've been dragging it around behind me. With every labored step and movement, it reminds me that I cannot escape, and I want to give up. Give in, pretend this cell I'm in is freedom. Oh, keep my head down, don't give you a reason to look my way. 'Cause I'm too ashamed to meet your eyes, to speak your name. Scared that I'll be held in chains, bound in lies forever. And I long to hear a sound like something metal being shattered. Oh, shame is a chain, love is a hammer. Some days I want to find you in a crowd and sneak up right behind you. Maybe touch your clothes and steal some power from you and sneak away again. And some days I'd rather hide out in a tree that you were walking under. Oh, and pray that you don't say you're coming over, 'cause I don't want to let you in. Oh, but you don't wait to be invited. You're kicking down my door with violent mercy and completely taking over. And I swear I hear a sound like something metal being shattered. Oh, shame is a chain, love is a hammer. Please be careful. The man beneath beneath these chains is frail and fragile. And I've worn them for so long that they feel natural. The truth is I'm afraid. But if anyone can understand, it's you. 'Cause on your feet and hands the proof of what you did and how you suffered. When the nails went in, the sound of sin forever being shattered. Oh, shame is a chain, love is a hammer.
I think my favorite lines in there, mate, are, I think in the bridge, the man beneath these chains is frail and fragile. Be careful, I've worn them so long it feels natural. You're tapping into some things that I think resonate in a heart level with most people, but even if they don't have words to say them, yeah. Thank you for that.
Sure, thank you. So I had some tools now, right? Because I knew that I was grieving this life I wanted, the end of that life. And I knew that shame was kind of a primary obstacle. So at least I could work on it. And I remember for me that work, I started seeing a counselor, started taking some medication. And I say that deliberately, not because I'm proud of it, but because I think the church tends to stigmatize taking medication for this kind of thing. But I just want to make sure that I say that. But I also was trying to, just because I'm nerdy this way, I wanted to know what the Bible said about these things. Was there any talk about this in the Bible? And so what I realized was our faith heroes, including Jesus, dealt with complicated and extreme emotions, right? And I want to pull back from just depression and anxiety, because some of you are never going to go into some place where you're going to get diagnosed with any of that, and maybe you don't even have that, but you are dealing with extreme things. So I want to make sure that we speak to this in a broader sense than just, because I think some of us can escape if we're like, oh, he's talking about something that people have that I don't have, right? So, but you do probably deal with extreme things, right? And so I just went looking, and there are things like, as the deer, I forget which psalm this is, but starts out with, as the deer pants for the water, my soul longs for thee. There's a line in there in the CSB translation that says, I am deeply depressed, which I remember seeing that and being like, oh man, somebody in the Bible is deeply depressed. This is great. But even Jesus, okay, so I started looking and I saw these three stories and they shocked me. The first one I saw was John chapter 11. This is Jesus is good friends with Mary and Martha and Lazarus, who are sisters and brother. And Lazarus, everyone knows this story. Lazarus gets really sick, and Mary and Martha send for Jesus. He's far away, and there's a really strange moment that I won't, sort of exegete, which is it says Jesus loved them very much, so he waited, which is really strange. Doesn't feel like that's the right way to say that. But so he waits. He comes back at some point. At this point, Lazarus is dead. Martha runs out to him, super mad at him because she knows he's got like superpowers or whatever, right? So she's like, my brother's dead. If you'd been here, you could have stopped this. And Jesus says, he's going to rise again. And she thinks he means like at the end, right? And so, she's like, I know he's going to rise, whatever, on the last day. And he's like, no. And he doesn't say, hold my beer, because Jesus wouldn't say that. But he does kind of a moment like that. Am I allowed to do that? He does a moment like that.
You just did.
Yeah.
You just did.
It's the second service, so I'm going to throw in all the inappropriate words that Scott says he prayed against having. I didn't know about that particular rule.
I didn't pray against that one.
So, but here's the deal. He's going to go do this amazing thing. He's going to raise a person from the dead. This doesn't happen, right? And it's inarguably good news if someone's going to rise again from the dead. Death will be over for that person, right? For that, whatever. And what does he do? He goes to the tomb, and it says he cries. And I'd seen that my whole life, because that's like a youth group favorite verse. It's like two words, Jesus wept. So we all love that verse, but I'd never thought about, wait, why is he crying? He's going to do this great thing. Why is that sad? Why cry? And all I can come up with is this. Jesus knows things we don't know, and he knows that death, even if it's for a couple of days, is awful. It's horrible. It's what he came to eradicate. And he knows he's gonna, and he hasn't yet, and so he's crying because death is awful. And he gives it that moment. And when people come to us in our broken moments, and we're crying, or we can't get over it, and they say, it's gonna get better, it's fine, well, stop crying, they're doing their best. But they're missing what Jesus totally gets in that moment, which is death. Moments, days, forever, whatever, it's awful. It's worth crying about. So I was like, oh my gosh, I see Jesus crying completely irrationally. I've done that. That's great to see that my Savior did this weird thing that I did too.
In fact, it says several times in multiple different vocabulary words how deeply moved he was within. Yes. Like it stresses the point. It's not just the 2-word verse. Right. It stresses the point multiple times to make the point. Right.
And that's so human that I don't even know what to do with it, And so then you see John chapter 2, and this is, where Jesus goes into the temple and knocks over tables and makes a whip. And I mean, there's no way to argue that this was an extreme anger moment. This might be the hardest one of all to deal with, because we don't know how to sort of quantify anger as anything but bad. And here's Jesus being super angry. He didn't sin somehow, but he was really, really angry. And I was like, I get angry, and I always think I'm in trouble for it, and occasionally I do something dumb, but my anger is not a sin. And then third, you have Jesus in the garden praying, and this is a super complicated theological thing that I don't have the experience or knowledge to exegete, but he's praying to his Father. They're both God, so it's super strange, and he's asking if he can not do this thing that he's supposed to do, and the Father says, no, and so Jesus somehow in all of that, he gets so worked up, so emotionally stressed out, whatever, that he bleeds through his pores. Some of you have heard of these kind of concepts like the body keeps the score, and it's this idea that like trauma can get stored in here if we don't deal with it properly, or while we're dealing with it, it can get stored. And I don't know a lot about that. I'm not a health professional, but I know that it's real. So here's Jesus like physically manifesting his stress. And when I saw those 3 stories, I just was like, oh, he doesn't just get me because he's God. He gets me because he's dealt with stuff. Complicated, extreme, uncomfortable, socially awkward stuff. And that was a deep, deep comfort to me. And I wrote a song about it, which I will sing now.
Think about Hebrews chapter 4. We have a high priest that is not unable to sympathize with what we struggle with because he experienced it all. He experienced it all. And we think of that in a comforting, generalized way, but make it specific and think about all the emotions that are involved in the human experience. And Jesus was involved in all of those. He lost a father, as Ross has, as some of you have. His adopted father, Joseph, died when he was young. All of the scholars agree with that. That's why he's not in the narrative later. He experienced the betrayal of a friend. He experienced all of these emotions, but he taught us to, as I teach my kids, I try to, feel your emotions, just don't trust them. Feel your emotions, don't trust them, and definitely don't let them cause you to sin. But it's important to feel them.
When I wrote this, we had just moved fairly recently, and I was watching a friend of ours slowly die of leukemia. He was in his early 30s, multiple children, young wife, and we were trying to walk through life with her as we'd moved away and try to be there for her. He was a dear friend of ours. They were dear friends of ours. And I remember our church at the time in College Station celebrated Lent, which is this season of fasting leading up to Easter. And I remember asking Brittany, this wife of my friend, what are you doing for Lent? And she said the saddest thing I maybe have ever heard a person say about Lent. She said, I'm fasting from drinking alone. And that shocked me. Just give that a moment to take that in, that she drank alone so much that she had to fast from it for Lent. And that I went home and started working on this, because I'd already been thinking about all this. This is called Good Company. If sadness was a sin, Jesus never would have cried. That's exactly what he did when his good friend Lazarus died. And he knew that he would raise him up. And still the Lord was sad enough to grieve. If heartache was a crime, consider Jesus in the garden when he knew it was his time. And there was no better option, and he had to take that cup, and it stressed him out so much it made him bleed. If you've ever been so overwhelmed that you can barely breathe, my friend, you're in good company. If anger is so wrong, how about Jesus in the temple? It doesn't sound like he was calm when he was knocking over tables. And we know his heart was perfect, so there must have been a purpose for it all. If you've ever gotten mad at all the brokenness you see, my friend, you're in good company. In the darkness, you are not alone. There is a presence that will not let you go. Every tear that you have cried, every trial you have known, he's known it too. In the darkness, you are not alone. There is a presence that will not let you go. Every tear that you have cried, every trial you have known, he's known it too. So if defending your own honor and fighting for your rights are really so important, how come Jesus gave his life to pay for our salvation? He let a bunch of fools portray him as a criminal. If you've ever been humiliated, misunderstood, ridiculed, and hated, if you've ever gone through hell and faced the devil no one else could even see, my friend, you're in good company. You're in good company. In the darkness, you are not alone. There is a presence that will not let you go. Every tear that you have cried, every trial you have known, he's known it too.
Ross, there's a line in the end of the bridge, maybe. If you've ever faced a devil that no one else could see. What did you mean by that?
It's kind of this, that you got something going on in you, and for whatever reason, you're not allowed, or you don't feel free to tell it. With adoption, and an example would be there are often parts of our children's stories that are not ours to tell, but they deeply impact the way that we raise and deal with our children. And so you can't like go on the internet and be like, hey, everyone, this is a difficulty that I want you to share with me. It's no one's business, you know. Or you have some betrayal of a friend that everybody around you doesn't know that they betrayed you. You're not allowed to go ruin everyone's fun time because you've been betrayed by this person, you know. Or you have something in your family that's a secret, that's miserable, and you feel like when you go to bed at night, the enemy is speaking about that thing. And
I'm sure as a songwriter, you're looking for and crafting lines that have a bit of what I call omni-relevance. It's a line into every heart, no matter what. That's one of them. You know, you said you struggled with understanding depression, anxiety, but fear is something that was different for you.
Yeah. So like, you know, here I was. Okay. You know, like I said, I'm kind of stacking up all these tools that I have. You know. I know that I'm dealing with the death of a life I wanted. I know I feel some shame. I know I'm not alone. That's great. The Lord has felt these things. But then I ran into this idea of fear, because fear kept coming at me. I was afraid of failing a lot. I was afraid of not being who I could be for my family. I was afraid, you know, this is just honest, I was afraid of dying because my dad had died, and it sort of introduces mortality to you. I was afraid of not paying my bills, being a bad father, whatever. I just dealt with it all the time. And the Bible's kind of hard on fear. Like, there's a lot of do not fear, you know, just like that, that'll be like everywhere, you know, do not fear. And I made a bad voice, like the Bible's mean, but you know, you'll see that and it'd be like a command, don't fear. And so you'll see it as, oh man, I'm blowing this because I'm afraid. And these commands like the Lord will fight for you, just be still, you know. Or we don't have a spirit of fear, but we have a spirit of, you know, of what is that one? Power and self-discipline, yeah, you know. And there's no fear in love. Perfect love casts out fear. So, I must not have perfect love because I got fear. I just didn't know what to do with that. That stuff's in there, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't even know if there were stories about Jesus going to people who were afraid and helping them, you know. So I kind of came back to Psalm 23, or it came back to me in this whole thing. And so I want to run it down for you. I had always wondered why it says, he makes me lie down. That felt like a strange phrasing. You know, I was told as a kid, you know, in youth group, God's a gentleman. He won't ever do anything, you know, that he didn't. I don't know if that's like garbage or what, but that's what people would say to me. And here was this guy making you lie down. You know, it didn't feel very kind. Okay, why doesn't it say he invites me to lie down or he encourages me to lie down, right? And at some point it just came to me, I won't lie down unless he makes me. I'm going to keep looking for something to do to make this right. I'm going to chase down ideas and solutions, and I'm going to try to get enough money to beat it or enough influence or something.
Because rest isn't productive.
Oh gosh, no, we hate the Sabbath. I mean, it's probably the biggest sin of the American people is we don't Sabbath, right? And so I just thought, wait, maybe that's the spirit of the whole deal. Maybe the whole psalm is in that forceful love spirit. So just follow me here. He makes me lie down because I won't. Then at some point he gets me up and walks me by a quiet stream and says, listen to that sound of the stream. Do you hear that? That's peace. I can get you that kind of peace. Just trust me. It's going to take a little bit. I'll get you that peace. Then he leads me into a valley that's the darkest thing you've ever heard of. It's the valley where death casts a shadow over the whole valley. You know, it's like, it's not even death somewhere over there. It's so big it casts a shadow into this valley and you got to go through it. And the only reason why I'm comforted, it says, is that the Lord has a rod in his hand. And it might be the same rod he used to make me lie down. I don't know. But he was gentle with me. So I know if he leans in, he can take on all the threats. And then, and maybe my favorite part of the whole thing, he makes a meal for me in front of my enemies. So this would be like if there was a glass casing around this stage and a feast was prepared on this table. And instead of all you nice folks, they invited everyone who hates me, everyone who I've ever wronged, everyone who sees me on my worst day and decides that's who I am, everyone who wishes me ill, everyone who thinks my Instagram is too put together or whatever, right? They come and they watch while Scott gives me the best meal you can think of. He just poured me drinks. Says my cup overflows. It says he anoints my head with oil. That's what they did for kings and queens. So he treats me like I'm royalty in front of everybody that wishes I would die or just doesn't like me. That's the kind of goodness and mercy that follows me all the days of my life. And so what came to me was, I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to not fear. But everything that I fear, the Lord is scarier than all those things. And he loves me. He loves me. I don't know why. I don't have reasons for it. But all the stuff I'm afraid of is real. We shouldn't lie to you and tell you there's nothing to be afraid of out there. There is. The world's just as scary as you think, maybe worse. But the stuff that you're scared of, God scares that stuff. Right? So I wrote about that.
In those early years of Ross and I's friendship, he was writing a lot of story songs. Was this called In the Fields? Is that the? What? Something like that. Yes.
It's looking back was terrible.
He wrote a song, and I think it was about your dad.
Fields Were on Fire.
Fields Were on Fire. I think it was about your dad, or something like that. And he gifted me the original handwritten lyrics that he was working out, and it's all scratched out, and there's arrows to it. And that's framed at my house. And so
It's worth $7 now.
I thought about selling it on eBay, but I haven't yet. But
Things get tight. You got $7 you can get from that.
The passion that Ross has put into songwriting, even with Jamie Bryan, a good friend of his and ours, our worship pastor, he's written with Jamie. Of all the songs that he's written, and many of them really good, this one that he's about to share with you is by far my favorite. It speaks to my struggle with fear and insecurity, and I know it'll be a blessing to you.
You probably didn't notice, but so far in the 2 songs that I've written about depression and anxiety, I never used the words depression or anxiety, because when I wrote those songs, I wasn't sure it was okay to use those words yet. I was too scared to let people know. But I would get up and do those songs at concerts or whatever, and I would say, this is about me struggling with depression. And people would come up to me afterwards and say, oh, I didn't know that. That helps, to understand the song better, or helps me feel seen. And so I just committed, as I started putting together these thoughts on Psalm 23, that I wanted to use the words. I wanted to let people know, okay, there's no going back. I'm not going to unring this bell. I'm going to tell people that I use medication and I've been to a therapist and that I have depression and anxiety. So I wanted that to be a place where people could be like, okay, at least I'm not the only one who feels like that. This is called Things That I'm Afraid Of. When I am shaking and my heart's pounding, you always take me, make me lie down in peaceful fields where I can clear my head. 'Cause I get so overcome with anxiety, like there's an enemy living inside of me, like a mocker yelling out, telling lies to me. And I don't feel brave, but I don't have to be, 'cause I walk through the valley of shadows, and it scared me half to death. But you're with me everywhere I go, so I don't give up yet. My fear would surely kill me if I didn't know the truth. The things that I'm afraid of are afraid of you. When my emotions turn against me, not faith nor reason could convince me that you have patience left to fight for me. When my depression is affecting every ounce of me, I can get the medication and the counseling, still I can hear the fear calling out to me. And I don't feel brave, but I don't have to be, 'cause I walk through the valley of shadows, and it scared me half to death. But you're with me everywhere I go, so I don't give up yet. My fear would surely kill me if I didn't know the truth. The things that I'm afraid of are afraid of you. as calm and relaxed as can be. There's no place where the demons won't find me, but just wait till they see who's standing behind me. I walk through the valley of shadows, and it scared me half to death, but you're with me everywhere I go, so I don't give up yet. My fear would surely kill me if I didn't know the truth. Things that I'm afraid of are afraid of you. Oh, I walk through the valley of shadows, and it scared me half to death, but you're with me everywhere I go, so I don't give up yet. My fear would surely kill me if I didn't know the truth. The things that I'm afraid of are afraid of you. The things that I'm afraid of are afraid of you.
Church family, I want you to know that our family here, and it is a family, we want to be a place that we can talk about these things honestly. We want to be a place where we can have the awkward conversations and we can be vulnerable with each other in a safe place. We can protect and support each other. And so all of the care and counseling ministries that I mentioned before, from Regen to Reengage to Free to Be to divorce care to foster care and adoption to private individual counseling, which we offer most days of the week here, we want to be a place where we can have these conversations and find healing and support together. Community is important. We don't want you to walk through these things by yourself. These ministries that I mentioned happen every week of the year, and we want to meet you there. Can you thank Ross for us once again? Thanks, my friend. Yep. He's got some CDs that he makes available to you at guest services, actually just for a donation, and you can find his music online anywhere that music is sold under Ross King. I know it will be a blessing for you. Let me pray for you. Father, we love you and thank you. And thank you for creating a safe place for us, Father, where we can talk about hard things in life without disappointing you. We love you. Thank you for your grace and mercy in our life. And we pray for safety and healing and support for any in our church family. And there are many who are struggling with these things. For everyone tuning in and everyone here, my prayer of blessing is that they would walk with you this week. They would sit with you in your word. They would hear your voice in their life, and they would experience the fullness of joy in your presence. We love you, Father, and we thank you. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.